Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tutor's Guide to SAT Math. Today's going to be a little special because we are not going to be talking about ordinary school stuff. In fact, the SAT is only very tangentially related to school. Um, there's a lot that I want to discuss about how you perform on the SAT, after which we are going to go through a sample section. But there's some very important things that I want you to take away from the SAT. And the first is that the SAT is not a regular school test. And while, yes, that's an obvious statement on some level, there's some deeper ramifications. You need to consider that, first of all, it's a multiple choice test. You very rarely get multiple choice tests in math in school. And that has some trickle down effects. You also have to understand how they design the test and what they are designing the test for, because it very much changes the strategy, the approach, and the mindset. For instance, you don't have to show work because it's a Scantron. Nobody cares about how you got there. There's no partial credit. It's either right or wrong. A machine grades it, runs it through there, and either says, yes, you got it, or no, you didn't. So it does not matter how you get your answers. You could use all kinds of weird backdoor strategies. You can use whatever occurs to you that makes sense as long as it is sound and works out correctly. If you can use clairvoyance or telepathy to read the minds of other people in the room taking the test with you, hey, as long as you're not actively looking off their test, it's not cheating, right? Um, these are the kinds of things that I'm going to say you should be doing on the test. Do whatever it takes. You are in a war with this test, and in war, there are no rules. The only thing you have to obey is that it is just you and the test, and that you are fighting against the timer. So let's talk about competing directly against the test. Here's how the test works. Um, College recruiters use this test, and they do not use it to indicate how smart you are. You do not ever want to measure yourself by the standards of how did you do on the SAT. It does not provide any sense of self-worth whatsoever. Um, if somebody asks, how did you do on the SAT? And you go, oh, I only got a 400 on the math versus, oh, I got a 650 on the math, that doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't. The test is only good at indicating how well you do on the test itself. And you might ask, well, what's the point of it? And the point of it is very simple. College recruiters use this test to differentiate people. The point of this test, let me see, I need a new color. That's almost the same as that button. The point of the SAT is to differentiate. And what I mean by that is that college recruiters are going, and college admissions officers, and whoever's going to be looking at your SAT, the people in each of the various universities, they're going to be saying, oh, we've got 300 people applying, and we're only going to take 200 of them, and adjust those numbers accordingly for whatever school you want to apply to. But they need to know how to tell people apart. And in some cases, some schools get absolutely flooded with applications to the point that they need some way to tell them apart. And it's slow and it's costly and it's also not very effective to make those decisions based on other criteria. Who can write the best essay? Is that really going to indicate who's going to be the best student? I mean, it'll possibly indicate one component of that, but if you're going to be a computer programmer, do you need to be able to write a good essay? Um, so there's a lot of things that go into this, and uh, also just evaluating that essay, it takes time. You got to read it, you got to go through it carefully. What the college recruiters do is they start looking at people's scores and they start sorting them into piles. So they say, okay, this is an average student, this is an average student, this is an average student. Imagine these are the papers for the applications. This person did really well. Oh, wow. This person did poorly. This person did really well. This is an average student. This is an average student. And then once they've kind of sorted them into piles, then they take a look. They do not look very long at the people in this group. You want to be in this group because they're not going to consider your other credentials very hard. They're just going to go, oh, got a 700 on the math and a 650 on the verbal. That's 1350 total. That looks pretty good. Then they look at this pile and they look at them a little more carefully. They consider things like, what is your class rank? What activities were you in? Blah, 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 blah. All the things that, you've heard everywhere else in the massive echo chamber. Um, and those, it's fine to be in this group, but this is, ideally you're going to end up in the top group. Where you don't want to be is down here, because if you do poorly on the SAT, that is a red flag. And that says to them, this person could be really bad. It's not an automatic, it's not a guarantee, but what it does say is this person didn't demonstrate that they could perform well on this test. Maybe they won't perform on other things. And that's not fair. It is absolutely 100% not fair. Do not think for a second that in any way, any of what I'm describing is good. The reason why they do it is because it's quick for the recruiters and because nobody has been able to define a better system. If you can come up with a better system, you'll be a very rich person, because nobody in the last 80 or 90 or however many years the SAT has been running has been able to do it. There's a lot of things that go into the system for how to determine how to do this quickly and efficiently. And the SAT is the very, very flawed but best answer we have. So when you keep that in mind, realize that it's a bogus system. It is absolutely a bogus system. There are lots of pitfalls to the way that they do things. Your goal is to try to leverage those things rather than be a victim of them. So please be aware that the important idea of the test is to tell people apart. So specifically how the scoring works, in each section, the math and the verbal, I'm going to be focusing exclusively on the math because I'm a math tutor. Uh, it's scored from 200 to 800. And if you get an 800, that means you got a perfect score. Or in some rare cases, you might have been able to get one wrong. But it means you basically had a flawless test. A 200 is if you get everything wrong. The reason they start at 200 is because they used to, emphasis on used to, take off points if you got a question wrong. Only a fraction of a point compared to getting a full point right for getting a question correct. But they wanted you to have some place to go so that they didn't have to assign negative scores. It sounds terrible, but there are people who would legitimately score below 200 under the old version of the test before they updated it. However, the majority of students are going to fall into the average category by definition. There's some statistical principles at work here that mandate that the majority of students will end up between 400 and 600. It's automatic because there's a two-phase system to how they design the scores. The first is that they get your raw score. The raw score is how many you get right. I need to erase this other stuff. Raw score is just, did you get questions right? Yes or no? How many did you get? And they will just count up the questions right, and that's the end of it. So out of 54 questions, how many did you get correct? Then you have your weighted score or your reported score. And what that is, they're going to kind of make a scale. They make a scale and they pick where you are based on that. So what that looks like is this bell curve shape that I've been kind of hovering around this thing up here, because what they'll do is they'll take everybody that took that particular test on that particular day and they'll say, whatever the median score, the very middle number, they're going to take that and they're going to go, okay, you know what? That right there, that's a 500. And then they weight everything accordingly. They say, okay, a perfect score is 800, a perfectly flawed test is a 200, and they fill out the other numbers in between, but they do it so that it meets this shape. So the majority of students, I don't know the exact number, but I'm going to say it's about 70% are going to score between 400 and 600. And then there's going to be a few students who do really well and a few students who do really poorly. And this is how they differentiate. So the goal of the SAT is not to get an 800. I mean, don't get me wrong, getting an 800 is the ideal circumstance. But considering they're using this to compare you against everyone else, your goal is not to end up here. Your goal is to end up here, right ahead of this line. Now, it's going to vary based on the test or the school that you're applying to, because different schools have different standards. But if we're talking about a very generic student belonging to very generic college, that's what we want to aim for. Basically, a 601, because everybody in the 400 to 600 range is average, varying shades of average. Obviously, a 550 is better than a 450, but um, your score that you get is really just going to be weighted, it's going to be pitted against everybody else who's going to that school. So what I want you to remember is that your SAT is only used for getting into the school of your choice. Now, that does not mean that if you do poorly, you will not get into college. There will always be a college somewhere who is willing to take you. Colleges are businesses. They want your money. However, they also treat you as a walking, talking advertisement for their school once you graduate. If you perform exceptionally well in the real world, if you are a very successful business person or expert in your field or whatever, they want to be able to say, oh, and they graduated from, and then insert their school here. So as a result, they want people who are going to make them look good. And so not only do they want people that are going to make them look good, but whatever standard the college has, so an average school is talking probably, 400 to 600 is average student in their book. If you are looking especially good, if you're out here, then they're going to say, wait a minute, we really want this person. And they're going to want them so much that they're willing to have kind of an investment in you. That is to say, they're going to basically hand you money, and they're going to do that in the form of a discount. So that's where scholarships come in, is to say, oh, hey, yeah, we want you to go here and not to some other school. So in order to attract your attention, we're going to make it really cheap for you. College is super expensive. Let's get that out of the way. Unless you have somebody in your family who is very magnanimously going to pay for it for you, you are going to be in debt. College will weigh you down. There is a certain school of thought that college isn't even worth it. I don't think that that's going to hold true, because so many people are going to college that if you don't, college is going to be a baseline expectation for a lot of people when it comes to looking at jobs, even if going to college and getting a degree really doesn't indicate any sort of expertise in what you're doing. So, should you go to college? Well, that's dependent on you, but the answer is probably. Um, and because it's so expensive, college has gotten more and more expensive far faster than inflation over the last 20, 30, 40 years in almost a comical fashion. It's become very much a political topic at this point. But colleges in the US are ridiculously, absurdly expensive. It is not unheard of to come out of your college degree, or your not a college degree if you end up bailing on it, as the case may be, with $250,000 of debt. That's insane. So if you can get a scholarship, you absolutely should be aiming for getting a scholarship. But that said, that shouldn't be the single determining factor. It's just something very strong to consider. If you perform well on the SAT, you will get paid for it. You'll get paid down the road. It will not be a, oh, here's $500 sort of getting paid. But if you put in the work, it will be worth it to you. So whether or not that matters enough for you to put in the effort is up to you, but it is my personal belief that anyone can do well on the SAT. Some people are going to be naturally better at it than others, but anyone can do well. Scoring well on the SAT is not an indicator of anything other than how good you are at taking the SAT. It sounds horrible, but in reality, all the test indicates is how good you are at the test. You wouldn't think so. You'd think that the name Scholastic Aptitude Test would indicate something more than that, because Scholastic is educational stuff, aptitude, how good you are, test, exam. So an exam at how good you are at academic stuff. That's what the name suggests. And that's complete and utter BS. So please make sure that when you go into the SAT, you know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and that you have all the right intentions and that you're going into it with the right goals and motivations. That is the single most important thing I want to leave you with this video. Um, and there are two ways to improve. Neither of them are going to be getting better at math or getting better at reading or whatever. I mean, getting better at reading maybe, but on the math side, I will not make you a better math student. What you need to understand is how the test works, because it's a very particular test. And the other way to improve is to practice. And the reason you practice is not because it makes you a better math student, it's because it will help you understand how the test works. Ah, yes, that's all it is. If you understand the test and you know how to approach it and you have good tactics, this is a test where you are competing against the test and nothing more. So you need to go into this with the attitude of test, I am going to beat you, because that is how it works. The test is out to get you. You need to be out to get the test. And that means that you are going to leverage every component of that test to your advantage. Now, how do we do that? Well, every question, first of all, is multiple choice. So there's some things that you can do. So I want to talk about question solving techniques. The first thing that you can do is just do the stinking question. Whatever they expect you to do, just go and do it. You know, treat it like a normal math textbook question that your teacher gave you for homework, and that works most of the time. Most questions can be done the proper way. What you're going to find is that the proper way is not mandatory, and that if you take any sort of backdoor method or any sort of shortcutting technique, that's okay. Go ahead, do it. So, ideas for how to approach that is to take advantage of the fact that you're getting a multiple choice math test. You never get to take multiple choice math tests. Maybe at your midterm and final because your teacher has to grade them super quickly and has to just feed them through a Scantron so that they can pop stuff onto your report card at the very last day of school. But normally when you get a test in math, it's not multiple choice because your teacher wants to see your work. It's a component of how they know you didn't cheat, for one thing. Um, but if it's multiple choice, try plugging in the answers. This is especially good for questions that ask, what is the value of X? Either literally or implicitly. What is the value of X is where we go and we say, well, it could have been any number on the entire number line, but the question is telling us it has to be one of these four. It's either A, B, C, or D. Let's just see which one works. And sometimes that's faster. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes the expression's really complicated and it's not worth it. But that is absolutely a thing that you can do. A second technique, very closely related, is to eliminate the answers, to say, oh, well, whatever's going on, I know it can't be C. C doesn't make sense. Cross it out. And at that point, if you've got four answer choices, A, B, C, and D, and you say, well, it's not C, now you've got a 1 in 3 chance instead of a 1 in 4 chance. Should you guess on the SAT? This is a very important question to ask. Should you guess? I need to make this text larger because this is important. No, you know what? Even larger than that. Yeah, there we go. Should you guess on the SAT? What do you think? Is it worth guessing or is it not worth guessing? You don't get anything taken off for getting it wrong. I'm going to tell you that right now. So should you guess? That is a big, fat, emphatic yes. Yes, you should guess on the SAT. You should have guessed on the old version of the SAT back before they revamped it, whatever, 15 years ago, but you should definitely guess now because there's no penalty. It does not hurt you. Now, it is better to have the right answer, of course, but if you're running out of time, you've got 5 questions to go, and the proctor says 1 minute left, C, 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 or D, 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 or A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, or whatever. Just go answer the questions because there's no harm. Even the free response questions, the ones where you are gritting in your answer, uh, you definitely want to put something down. Put down 0, put down 1. They're the most common answers. But you absolutely need to put something down. When you take the test, I'm going to talk about some strategies about how to do that. But uh, as far as going through the questions, another thing is sometimes you can estimate. You can go, oh, so they're asking how much was the original price for something that's on sale for $200? Well, you know what? The original price better be more than $200. So if I've got a couple answer choices that are more than 200, that's got to be bogus. Cross those out. And then there's 2 answers left that are more. And you go, okay, so it was a 20% off sale. One of those answers was like 250 and the other was 400. 400 is way too freaking big. There's no way that 20% off is going to bring you all the way down to 200. And you go, all right, it's got to be the 250. So combining estimating with eliminating, uh, you're able to get the answer to that question. The fourth type of strategy that I'm going to ask you about or suggest is picking numbers. This is good for formula answer choices. When you have something that looks like a formula in every single answer choice, when it's like y equals x over 2, and then the next one's y equals 2x, and y equals x plus 2, and you have to figure out which of these formulas is the correct one. My suggestion is pick numbers, and you'll see that when I go to do actual questions, but you're not going to have that make a whole lot of sense right now. So I will illustrate that when I do questions, which you may have to tune into a different video for because this one's getting pretty freaking long. The fifth thing that I'm going to suggest is make a visual aid. Draw a chart, a table, a list, a whatever. So for instance, if they say that there's 7 numbers in a list and the median is, well, make 7 blanks and say that median is whatever number they tell you, and then go, okay, these 3 have to be greater than or equal to 50. And these 3 have to be less than or equal to 50. So when I start asking you questions about what must be true, well, you know that this is the case. If they tell you, if we took the biggest number and reduced it, what would happen or which could change? Well, if I take this number and I bring it down here, that'll move the median, it'll move the mean. But only if I take it all the way down to here. If I only put it here, it won't affect the median. And so if they ask which would not be affected if, well, sometimes it's the median, sometimes they say which is, not going to change and it's going to end up being the range. If you're moving a middle number within here, the range is still top minus bottom. So they ask a lot of questions like that. We're just drawing a picture. Sometimes making a chart, a 2x2 table is very helpful. So if you have like an age question, you say now and then for person A and person B. Here's now in 5 years, they're x plus 5. The other person is a third of that, or a third of x plus 5. And guess what? 5 years ago, they were 5 less than that. And then you go and start comparing things. So there's lots of things that making a visual aid is helpful for. And common sense is the one you're going to want to use least frequently. However, it is a strategy and it is something you will occasionally use. And apparently Zoom wants to keep erasing my most important point of all. So I would not say use common sense frequently, but you do want to use it. Now, when you're taking the test, the only scratch paper you're going to get is the test itself. So write notes all over the test. You want to make highlights, you want to make underlines, you want to make notes on how you did the question, because ideally you're going to have time to go back and check your work. You do not want to spend a whole lot of time on any one question, and the reason why is because you need to manage time. Time is the most important thing to deal with. Given enough time, I believe that you should be able to answer just about every question unless you get tricked. So if you take it slow and you answer every question painfully methodically, you should be able to get all of them right. I know that there are questions on the SAT that are going to be like, oh, I had no idea that's what they were asking. That's fine. With enough practice, you'll eventually learn what those are and also what you needed to do with them because they ask the same types of questions over and over again. And the reason they do that is because they want these scores to be fairly consistent between tests. That's what happens when you have a standardized test. Standardized tests are absolutely bogus, but because they generate questions and tests that are basically the same every time, um, that rehearsal is going to get you to know what's going on, and gradually you will get faster with your practice. So we want to make sure that we are going as quickly as we can be without rushing. But you also want to accept that you might not answer every single question. You might be trying to get as many as you can and accepting, you know what, I'm not going to answer the last three because I know that I'm not going to have time to get there. I'm not going to frustrate myself. When you're on the calculator section, obviously use a calculator you're comfortable with. I know too many people who are not used to using graphing calculators and then they go, oh, but I'm taking the SAT, and they borrow a TI-89 and they have no idea how to push the buttons on it because it's weird and complicated. And if you don't use a TI-89, you're not going to know how to use a TI-89. Don't do that. Use the calculator you're used to using in school, or if not in school, the one that you just simply know where all the buttons are. So you don't waste time hunting around trying to figure out where the pi button is or something like that. But time is absolutely essential. We need to manage it. We need to say, okay, you get 75 to 90 seconds per question. If you're taking more than that, you need to hit it and quit it. Put something down, circle it in your answer book to say, I need to come back to this, and move on. And the number one most important thing to keep in mind is that you always need to answer the stinking question. Please, please, I beg of you, do not do everything else correctly and then not answer what they want. If they give you a triangle and they say, okay, this is a right triangle, and this angle up down here is x, and this is 20 degrees. If they ask you, what is the value of x plus 20? Do not tell them 70. Yes, x equals 70. It's very tempting to pick the 70-degree answer, but x plus 20 is just whatever's left after we take out this right angle. It's 90. Please make sure you answer what they're asking. They will trick you in some cases. In other cases, they'll just potentially be able to ask you a couple different things, and you need to make sure you provide the one they want. The worst thing you can do is get the question right and not get credit for it. And to that effect, that also means that you are writing your answers in your test book and checking afterwards, like after you've gone through on a single pass, because the worst thing, the absolute worst thing you can do is to, on your Scantron, you've got your Scantron, and let's say you skip number two. So on number one, you bubble in C, and then number two, you skip, and then number three, you go three is A, and you go to the first blank and you fill in A, and then for four, you fill it in, you go four is B, and you do this, and all of these are wrong, and you have to go and fix them. Hopefully, you find out before the end of the section, and you go, oh God, I have to move these all down. But if you don't know where you missed the wrong answer, you're not going to know how to fix it, and maybe you don't even notice that it's wrong. You need to make sure this does not happen, because this is the worst. You're going to automatically get 3/4 of the test wrong if you do that. So there's a lot to go into getting good at the test, but this is the idea of how to practice the SATs. This is the idea of what to aim for. I will be doing an upload of doing a sample test as well, but these are the things that you need to hammer into your skull about what is important about the SAT and what should I be doing to prepare for it. If you have any questions, ask in the comments below. Thank you.